goods cheaper in poor countries? If you've traveled the world or maybe just talked to someone who has, you might have noticed that at least some things are much cheaper when you buy them in poorer regions, such as South America, Southeast Asia, or Africa. For instance, a friend of mine recently returned from a long journey through Latin America, and he told me that restaurant meals were so cheap there that it never made sense to cook for himself. Meanwhile, here in Canada, if I tried to eat out at restaurants for every meal, I'd go broke. Another friend of mine said that in his home country of Brazil, it's common for middle-class families to have a full-time maid. Barely anyone can afford a full-time maid in the United States, even though it's a much richer country than Brazil. And when I take a taxi ride in North America, I expect to pay between $50 and $100 to drive across a city. But if I took a cab in Nairobi, I'd pay a $5 flat fee. But it's not the case that all goods are cheaper in poorer parts of the world. A new pair of blue jeans sell for about the same price in impoverished Haiti as they do in nearby Florida. And how could they not? If blue jeans in Haiti were, say, 1/4 of the price of blue jeans in Florida, some clever person would buy up a bunch of Haitian blue jeans, load them on a boat, and sell them in Florida for less than the other sellers and still make a tidy profit. The important thing about all the examples I gave, restaurant meals in Latin America, maid services in Brazil, and taxi rides in Nairobi, is that they're not things you can ship to other parts of the world. If you want to buy a restaurant meal, you have to be in the same place as the chef. If you want your house cleaned, the maid needs to be there at the house. And if you want to take a cab ride, the cab driver had better be on the same continent as you. And if the maid, chef, or cab driver tried to move to a developed country like Canada or Germany or Japan or the United States, they'd be stopped at the border and sent back. So the reason some goods are much cheaper in poor parts of the world is that immigration laws stop the majority of the world's poor from trading services with the majority of the world's relatively rich. So the services that poor people are good at providing are cheap in the places lots of poor people live and expensive in the places most poor people are barred from entering. But what if we didn't stop people from living and working in the wealthy parts of the world? If there were no migration restrictions, then chefs, maids, and cab drivers in poor countries would notice that they could be earning a lot more if they moved, and many of them would. Their competition in developed countries' labor markets would drive down the costs of services in those countries, while their absence from their home countries would drive up the costs of services in those countries, until services cost the same everywhere. Economists have estimated that the total wealth of the human race, or global GDP, would increase between 50 and 150% if migration restrictions were lifted worldwide. Most of these benefits would go to the very poor migrants who would suddenly gain access to a much larger labor market. And yes, going back to my original question, the large price differences between poor and rich countries would go away for the most part. The remaining price differences would come from things like transportation costs, tariffs, and trade restrictions, but these are all relatively minor compared to the huge economic impact of migration restrictions.